Hello, and welcome to the Biomass Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Anna Simet. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we are doing our final panel preview for the International Biomass Conference and Expo, which is being held in Atlanta, March 18th through the 20th. And for these podcasts, we are chatting with some of our speakers to provide sneak peeks of the presentations that we have coming to the show. And you can listen to these if you go to biomassconference.com, go to the agenda, and then click the little megaphone icons next to the presentations that have them. So today I have with me Brecc Avellar, Senior Systems Sales Engineer of the US and Canada at PYREG Inc. And Brecc will be presenting in Track 3, Biogas and RNG, on panel titled Managing Digestate and Biosolids Post-Anaerobic Digestion. Welcome to the podcast, Brecc. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Anna. Looking forward to it.
It is our pleasure. So to begin, Brecc, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and PYREG?
Sure. Yeah, glad to. Well, I've been in the waste to value business since the 1980s when I first graduated from Virginia Tech. I started out in the ethanol fuels business. Worked at a company that fermented all sorts of waste sugars and starches into fuel ethanol. And that's where I got my first exposure to anaerobic digesters and digestate and what to do with digestate. Then I moved on to biodiesel from waste fats and greases, and then on into electric power, including fuel gases from anaerobic digesters, the biogases. So again, a lot of experience in digestate. And more recently, I started developing projects that capitalize on biochar, which is a great product for carbon sequestration. And then I joined PYREG late last year to pull a lot of this together. And a little bit about PYREG, I guess. So PYREG GmbH is a German manufacturer of machines for carbonizing organic waste, meaning make biochar out of organic waste like biomass, but also sewage sludge and digestate solids like we're talking about here. And they make a biochar, and at the same time, they make renewable energy and carbon sequestration credits. And PYREG is really generally regarded as a leader in this field. Helmut Gerber was the founder of PYREG. He's a real pioneer in CO2 removal credits, started back in 2009 as PYREG. And since then, they've commissioned about 60 plants worldwide. PYREG was the very first technology partner of Puro Earth, the world's leading credit platform for engineered carbon removal. And yeah, since then, PYREG's done even more work with other carbon credit platform. And then about 3 years ago, PYREG got into the US, started up a US subsidiary, doing a lot of work here, end-to-end biochar project development support, in addition to selling equipment. So we're really trying to help developers get going here in the US. And when I joined PYREG, I'm now part of that team to try to help developers find a niche in this market and use PYREG equipment to deal with digestate disposal.
Okay, got it. So your presentation is focused on digestate and is titled From Waste to Value, Managing Digestate Solids in the Renewable Natural Gas Industry. Can you explain for our listeners who don't know, what is digestate?
Sure. Well, digestate is the outflow from an anaerobic digester. And for folks in the industry, they probably know that many organic wastes, particularly things like dairy cow manure, a very common way of disposing of that is to digest it in a big tank where you let methane forming bacteria grow, and they break down the organic waste into methane and CO2. Well, at some point, what goes in must come out, and the digestate is what comes out of the anaerobic digester. So it's usually a liquid with a lot of solids in it. What we look for when we're talking about digestate solids is those solids when they've been dewatered, so usually by centrifuging or filter pressing, and they make a wet cake, and then and the rest is water. And so Yeah, so digestate is typically the outflow from an anaerobic digester, and we're generally referring to the solids, not so much the liquid.
Okay, got it. And so in your presentation abstract, you said that managing digestate solids in the RNG space is a headache and that it can detract from realizing the full value of business. Can you talk about some of the pain points here?
Sure, Anna. Yeah, and there are some big pain points. So I guess the biggest pain point is that digestate is a waste, right? And it's got to be disposed of. In many cases, like, something simple like dairy manure digestate, you can just drag line the liquids out into the farm fields and spread it like a fertilizer, like a liquid fertilizer. But when you're making digestate solids, often called biosolids, if you're at a city or town wastewater treatment plant or a food waste digester, something like that, oftentimes they'll dewater their solids. They send the water down the drain, and then they spread the solids on farm fields. So in any case, that's all fairly costly, right? You've got to put in the equipment to dewater, then you have to put in the equipment to move it and haul it. That's one of the pain points. But a big pain point that's happening now is that we're finding more and more toxic forever chemicals in these biosolids, particularly for wastewater treatment plants and food waste digesters, often referred to as PFAS. That's one. Pharmaceutical residues, microplastics, all these things are causing real pain points. And that's really blocking the ability to spread these digestate solids out on farm fields directly. And some localities are actually banning the practice, which basically means you're left with the option of either thermally processing them to destroy those PFAS chemicals or putting them in a landfill. And landfills are quite expensive. So we're excited about the idea of being able to talk about thermal processing of these digestate solids in order to destroy these toxic chemicals and make the resulting processed solids much more acceptable in the environment.
Really interesting. That's a good segue then into my next question. You're going to focus on processing digestate biosolids using mid-temperature pyrolysis. So tell us more about this and why it may be a viable solution to help address some of those challenges that you just mentioned.
Sure. Yeah. In my presentation, I'm going to provide a lot more detail, but I'm going to talk about the processing conditions of time and temperature that turn digestate solids into a biochar, we call it, while rendering those PFAS chemicals and other toxic components into inert salts and carbon, but at the same time retaining the mineral nutrients in the biochar product. So that's going to make them valuable for use in land application. I'm going to talk about how producing these non-toxic, nutrient-rich biochars means you can safely apply them on farmland, and that will avoid some pretty high costs, particularly if you're talking about landfilling, which can often cost over $100 a ton, sometimes more. And I'll go over the installed equipment costs and operating costs on a few examples, and I'll show those savings over landfilling. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some market applications for these biochar solids besides just land application, things like Portland cement extender and concrete, and a few other things like that. But then let's be sure to not forget that the carbon credits generated when this biochar is added to concrete or blended into compost or topsoil, those credits alone can have a value of over $200 a ton. So you can really look to some big savings over landfill cost of disposal.
Okay, so last question, because we don't want to give too much away.
Right.
Do you plan to share some real world examples during your presentation? What kind of data are you going to share with attendees?
Yeah, so I'm going to share some real world examples of pyrolysis systems, mostly PYREG. That's where we have most equipment. We have numerous systems successfully rendering biosolids into biochar. Most of them are in Europe, but I will cover some projects here in the US. I'll show how we manage to use those systems' waste heat to dry the incoming wet solids, to make them ready to be pyrolyzed, and then how the pyrolysis process renders biochar from biosolids into biochar, maintaining the nutrient value. I'm going to also present and share an federal EPA report that documents PFAS destruction through the process. So yeah, all of that will be in my presentation. So looking forward to seeing you all in Atlanta and coming to my presentation.
Yes, I am looking forward to it very much as well. Brecc, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast to preview your upcoming presentation, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Anna.
You bet. And to our listeners, catch Brecc's presentation From Waste to Value, Managing Digestate Solids in the Renewable Natural Gas Industry on Tuesday, March 18th during our 3 p.m. breakout sessions. Learn more and register at biomassconference.com. Those who meet our biomass energy producer criteria get in for free. And with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you at the show in Atlanta. Until next time.